Let's look briefly at the function of the different parts of the spinal column in a slide of a cross section. Let's start with a couple of structures here. This dorsal median sulcus and the ventral median fissure. Primarily, these somewhat divide the spinal column into right and left halves. Let's look at the gray matter. Here we have the dorsal horns of the gray matter. These consist primarily of interneurons. The dorsal horn of the gray matter here is mostly made up of sensory neurons or interneurons. Up here in this region we have somatic sensory neurons, and a little further down we have visceral sensory neurons. The ventral horns of the gray matter here have a couple of interneurons, but mostly what we see are somatic motor neurons, things running to the skeletal muscle. The thicker this area is determined by how many skeletal muscle units are being controlled by that segment of the ventral horn. The neurons here in the lateral horn serve the visceral motor neurons, which happen to be autonomic. They are part of the sympathetic division. The gray commissure not only surrounds the central canal, which is full of cerebrospinal fluid, but also connects both the right and left halves of the gray matter in the horns in the spinal column. The function of the white matter are primarily tracks both ascending and descending within the spinal column. The dorsal funiculus transmits impulses from areas that you can pinpoint exactly where the stimulus is coming from. Very precise areas or small vibrations. These lateral funiculi transmit impulses that tell us of pain, of coarse touch, but it's much more localized. It's not as easy to tell exactly where these sensory receptors are picking up their impulses. These ventral funiculus are very similar to the lateral funiculus in that it transmits impulses from regions, but is not precisely pinpointed where the stimuli are coming from. The last section I want to look at here are the dorsal and ventral spinocerebellar tracts. These tracts convey information about muscle or tendon stretch to the cerebellum, which uses the information to coordinate skeletal muscle activity. That wraps up the functional part of the slide of the cross-section of a spinal column.